Hi, this is Edwin Dearborn, another edition of Growth Driven. And today I'm very excited about this interview, an author that I met via his materials. And now I get to talk to him, Josh Steimle. And we're going to talk about how to grow your influence with LinkedIn and social media in general. Hey, Josh, thanks so much for being on the show of Growth Driven.
Thank you, Edwin, for having me on.
Yeah, so as we were talking earlier, COVID hit, quarantine, went through kind of a rebranding, reinvention of self, started marketing myself as a virtual chief marketing officer. I said, I better read up on this stuff. Went to Amazon, typed in chief marketing officer. Bam, your book was at the top. I bought it and I'm 200 pages into it. I read it diligently almost every day. It's in my truck because I go to coffee shops every morning. And that's the book I grab and study and take lots of notes. And I found your work and your interviews extremely helpful for me. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I had a lot of fun writing it, although really I didn't write it. I interviewed some amazing people and they made my job easy.
Well, I think the genius is you put all those people together in one virtual room, if you will, and then, had the courage to publish the book. But you are now coming out with a new book here in November. I looked at your website, and we'll show your website here shortly where people can find you. And it's about LinkedIn, and which I think is so timely. I've had so many people interested in LinkedIn. Can you tell me what that new book is about and what you're trying to teach people in that book?
Sure. The book is called 60 Days to LinkedIn Mastery. It may or may not come out in November, actually, but okay. I'm pushing to get it out as quickly as possible.
Okay, great.
I'm working on it for years, actually, and I'm excited to get it out there. And I do think a lot of people will benefit from it. But it's essentially a chapter a day type of book, and there are 60 chapters, and each day you get a tip on something to do with LinkedIn that's going to move the needle for you. And you can apply that lesson in a matter of minutes. And by the time you get through all 60 of these lessons, you will know more than 99.99% of the people on LinkedIn about LinkedIn. You'll feel like an expert, but you'll have only invested a few minutes a day on it.
It's a brilliant approach. It definitely follows something I've studied, which is called Kaizen, that Japanese principle of small continuous improvement. So that's a brilliant approach. Why was your next book specifically about LinkedIn? What drew you to that platform?
It wasn't so much of a plan that I said, I'm going to go write a book on LinkedIn. But what happened was that, so I run a marketing agency. I have a marketing agency called MWI that I started in 1999. I've now mostly turned it over to some partners, but I'm still the founder guy. Mm-hmm. And in 2013, as a result of the experience I had running my agency, I got the opportunity to write for Forbes magazine as a contributor. Wow. And that led to opportunities with a lot of other publications. I ended up writing 300 articles for more than 24 publications, Forbes, Fortune, Mashable, TechCrunch, a bunch of places. But after about 3 years and 300 articles in all these places, I was getting kind of a marginal benefit from writing for these places, but it wasn't like every time I wrote an article, I got a huge response or something.
Right.
And so I was trying to branch out and see what other channels might work for connecting with my audience. And I thought, what if I just take some of my articles and copy and paste them onto LinkedIn and put them in the blog section where you can post articles. It used to be LinkedIn Pulse. Now it's just LinkedIn articles. And so I copied a Forbes article that I had written, put it up on LinkedIn, and I said this was originally published over at Forbes. Mm-hmm. And I had about 500 views on this article on Forbes. I got 14,000 views on LinkedIn and 100 comments. I had like 5 comments on Forbes. And I got so much more engagement from that same article on LinkedIn compared to what I got on Forbes. I thought, well, what am I spending all my time writing for Forbes and these other publications for when I can get not just 5 or 10 or 20 times the engagement, but it was like 100 times the attention and engagement on LinkedIn versus these huge platforms. And I was kind of stunned by that. So I tried it a few more times and the results were consistent. And I thought, well, gee, there's something to this LinkedIn platform. So this was back around 2016 or so. And so I started spending more of my time on LinkedIn because I could publish immediately. I could interact directly with the people I wanted to interact with. I didn't have to go through an editor and deal with that whole editing process. And so I thought, well, this just gives me so much more freedom and flexibility and 100 times the results. So this is where I'm going to focus my time. And at first, I didn't know what I was doing on LinkedIn. But over time, I started to follow some of the other experts and gather tips here and there.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened was after a few years of using LinkedIn and learning about it, I started to help other people with it and audit their profiles and teach them how to post content because I was having success. And so people were coming to me and asking questions. And I started posting tips. It was a tip every day. And I just thought, I'll do this for a week. And then I did it for 2 weeks. And then I did it for 3 weeks. And after 60 days, I had written 60 tips. And I thought, gee, if I just put these all together, this could be a book. Maybe I should do that. And that's where this book came from.
That's awesome. It's a great pathway that you found. Also, a takeaway here is if you're a content creator, you could think, oh, I need to be on Forbes and Inc. to build my brand, where here's this free platform. And if you wanted to spend $79 a month, if you really wanted to go on, Sales Navigator and take it to the next level, you actually got more engagement and traction on LinkedIn than these Fortune 500-ish type publications.
Right. And that's what kind of stunned me because I thought, gee, I know how hard it is to get onto Forbes and Fortune and these publications. It's not easy to get into these places. Right. And LinkedIn, anybody can do it. And yet here I am getting more results on LinkedIn than these hard to get on publications. And there's so much value in getting into those publications. It's great for building your brand. You get to put the logos on your website and say, I've been seen in these places or I've written for these places. So there's huge credibility.
Yeah.
But once you've written 50 articles for Forbes, if you write another 20 articles, you might get results from those articles or you might get nothing out of them. And that's where I had already gotten the value of being on those platforms. And so I felt like I'm going to go where the engagement is and where the real attention is. I don't need to chase the logos anymore.
Yeah, I think, and this is a good takeaway, which is do both. Get the brand recognition, shoot for the stars with that, but that isn't going to necessarily bring you fame and fortune just because you've got the logo Forbes on your Twitter website. The real business comes from the engagement on the social platforms.
Yeah.
Can you give me some examples or some success stories when you started publishing on LinkedIn? Obviously, you got the engagement of comments, but when did it really hit you? When you started getting clients, they saw you? Like, what was the kind of the big aha moment? Like, wow, I'm really going to double down on LinkedIn.
It was really that Forbes article. That's the first one that opened my eyes and made me say, I need to keep trying this out and see if this works. But then I started following a guy named Josh Fechter, I think is how you say his name. And he was so successful on LinkedIn, he actually got kicked off the platform. He's not allowed on it now. But he had figured out how to make posts go viral. And I came across one of his blog posts and I read it and I thought, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to do exactly what he says. And so I did that, and my posts were going viral. They were getting tens of thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of views and hundreds of likes and hundreds of comments. They were really performing well. And then when the Me Too movement came around, I had written a LinkedIn post. It wasn't intended to be connected to the Me Too movement, but it was a post and somebody commented on it. I can't remember what that post was about, but somebody commented talking about, it was a woman and she was talking about how she was subject to sexual harassment on LinkedIn. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Maybe it's because I'm a guy, but nobody's ever harassed me on LinkedIn. And I just thought, is this a thing? Like, I had no idea this was going on. But she was saying, oh, this happens to me all the time. And I thought, well, that's just odd. So I wrote a post up and I said, in the era of Me Too, it's interesting. I just heard from somebody, this woman, that she gets harassed on LinkedIn. Is this a common thing? And that's about all I said in this post. But I wrote it in this certain way that Josh Fetchter recommended. And that post went crazy viral. Now, it was a matter of timing and subject matter, so it wasn't just the way I wrote the post. Totally. But it ended up getting over 3 million views and I don't know, like 1,000 comments or something, because every woman who had ever been harassed on LinkedIn wanted to chime in and say, yeah, this has happened to me too. Wow. And that was eye-opening for me in a number of ways. I mean, number one, because I had no idea sexual harassment on LinkedIn was a thing before I saw that. And number two, because I thought, wow, like LinkedIn is a powerful tool. Look at this. I've got 3 million views on my post. But then the question was, well, can I do this again? Because I tapped into the Me Too movement to do this, but could I mean, that didn't bring me any business. That wasn't helping me in any way. It was just interesting. So I wrote another post and it was about being an entrepreneur and how when you're an entrepreneur, you don't treat yourself very well. I mean, essentially, you treat yourself worse than you treat any of your employees, or at least this is how it was for me. And this is how it is for every other entrepreneur I know.
I agree.
And so I wrote a post about this saying, and it started out saying, I have an employee that I need to report to the police or something like that, or I might be arrested for what I'm about to say. And then it just talked about how I treated this employee so terribly. I made him work weekends. I never paid him on time and all this stuff. And then at the end, of course, that employee is myself. And
that's brilliant.
If I treated anybody else in my company the way that I've treated myself, I would get arrested. I would get sued. I mean, no doubt about it. And, some people commented on this post because they thought like, well, gee, yeah, boo-hoo, you're the entrepreneur, you're the business owner, And so they were criticizing me for that. But the vast majority of people were saying, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur too, and I've gone through this, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And that post went to over 3 million views and got 1,000 comments and everything. And it got picked up by Dave Ramsey's podcast, and the guy who runs Dave Ramsey's podcast read my post on air. And then as a result of those two and a few other posts that I made that went viral, this style of writing posts, basically it's the thing where you break it into every sentence is a separate line with a break in between. This was like the thing that Josh Fetchter invented. And I was just copying it back in those days. Now it's kind of blown over. It doesn't really work anymore. People don't do it so much anymore, but it was a thing a couple of years ago. Yeah. And it became known as broetry because it was like men only doing this thing and writing these separate lines. And I actually was featured in an article. I can't remember the publication, but it was like a mainstream big publication. They wrote an article about this phenomenon of broetry on LinkedIn, and they mentioned Josh Fetchter and they mentioned me as an example. And they actually went and got a poetry professor to analyze our posts and talk about how he thought we were doing as poets on LinkedIn. And so I got publicity from that. And I've written other LinkedIn posts that got me into publications and press releases. So it's been interesting to see the power of LinkedIn, but it was all of these experiences that showed me, hey, LinkedIn is the place to be. You don't get this on Twitter. If you're a celebrity, you can do this on Twitter. If you're a celebrity, you can do this on Facebook. But if you're a normal person, there's nowhere that this happens, I think, other than LinkedIn. And I've done it, and a bunch of other people have done it too.
That's brilliant. Now I'm really going to get the book. I mean, just your statistical success is testimony to getting the book. Hopefully that book comes out very, very shortly. So you've gone in as a content creator and really found that LinkedIn, for being a non-celebrity, has really been the place to leverage an opportunity greater than any other place.
Right. Because I've got these logos behind my name. I've been in Forbes and all these places, but right. Nobody knows that about me when they see something I've written on LinkedIn. I mean, some people do, but 99% of the people who see my content, they have no idea who I am. I'm just some guy posting some stuff. Yeah. But it works because of the way that I do it. And it's not my secret. It's out there. but there's a certain pattern to the way that you do this, and you get results from it.
That's great. If you're just joining us, I'm with Josh Steimle. You can go to joshsteimle.com. For those that are going to listen to this, we also upload this to various podcasts. It's Josh Steimle, and Steimle is STEIMLE.com. Get his book on LinkedIn. Also, you've got a lot of blog posts and other content there that's extremely valuable. I also recommend that you get the book that he wrote in 2016, which I am which is Chief Marketing Officers at Work. So now I would like to I'm going to bring up a screen here. I'm going to share my screen. And I am going to bring up, I'm still learning this system. So just give me a moment to, there we go. So you have what's called the 7 systems of influence. Can you take this? I may have to scroll down a little bit, or I can just remove my banner there. I really was intrigued by this. And right before the show, I downloaded, and I encourage everybody to go to Josh Steimle and then go to the 7 systems of influence page, download this. Take me through this and how you came up with this and why you feel that this is a workable system for anybody to follow.
Sure. I came up with this because of my experiences with Forbes and the other publications, and then LinkedIn. And I've also had the opportunity to speak around the world as a result of my writing that led to speaking engagements. Because of the book, Chief Marketing Officers at Work, I was invited to go hang out with Richard Branson on his private island for a week with a bunch of other marketers, about 70 other marketers. And so I've had these crazy experiences that I look at and I think, how did this happen? I mean, I'm a normal guy. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not doing anything amazing out there. I mean, I wrote this book. It's okay. I've blogged. My blogs are okay, but there are other people out there who do much better work than I'm doing. So I'm like, I'm just a normal guy that extraordinary things have happened to. How did this happen? And how can I make it happen in the future? So I became fascinated by influence. And not influence in the sense of the crazy people on YouTube or Instagram or guys standing in front of Lamborghinis and houses saying, I'll teach you how to be influential. Like, I'm not into that kind of influence. It was more like, how do people connect with other people and influence them to take action and get stuff done? And for me, it extended to every asset or every aspect or facet of life. I mean, how do teachers influence their students? How do parents influence their children? How do leaders influence the people who follow them? How do authors influence their readers? I just was interested in, how does that happen? What's the science of that? And so I read every book I could out there, like How to Win Friends and Influence People and Robert Cialdini's book, Influence. And I read all of this, and they were really interesting, but they weren't really explaining the science of the type of influence that I wanted to understand. And so I just kept on doing research and collecting ideas and putting it together. And eventually it turned into this 7 systems of influence. I figured out that there are these 7 systems. And now I've had years to test these out and test them historically, going all the way back to the Roman emperors and seeing how they do things. And I can test this out and say, okay, did they do these things? And I can compare it to presidents or leaders today and say, okay, how do they do these things? And I can look at my own life and everybody who's ever influenced me and say, okay, which of these systems did they have working really well, and which ones were not so good, and why did it work or why didn't it work? But that's where these 7 systems of influence came from. So do you want me to walk through them real quick then?
Yes, but I do want to acknowledge something. I love the fact, Josh, you really took the time to get context about influence. Because I think when we say influence, immediately like it's me with the Lamborghinis on Instagram with hot models. I think that's the immediate image, is I'm on Bimini with a hot babe and a yacht. Where you have really taken the historical sense of influence, whether you're an Instagram model, a president, a business leader, a teacher, like, what is the science? You studied it, you reverse engineered it, and now you've developed a system that will allow somebody to analyze and replicate those elements of success. And I think that's genius.
Right. So you can take these 7 systems and you can look at anybody who has influence and you can analyze what they're doing. You can go through the systems and say, oh, they're doing 1 really well and 3 really well and 5 really well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, take us through this and, whatever stories or historical precedents of like why that module or why that system is there.
Sure. So the first system is vision, which is your idea of what you want to happen. Stephen R. Covey said all things are created twice. It's first created in our minds, and then it's created in the real world. So before we do anything, we think about it. Whether it's, hey, I'm going to take out the trash today. Well, there's your vision for the day. Or I'm going to launch a new company. Okay, that's your vision. Or I've got a business, but I want to take it to $100 million over the next 10 years. That's your vision. So vision can be small things. It can be 1,000 things you do every day, or it can be a huge thing that you're going to accomplish over the next 10 years. But for everything that you want to do, you've got a vision, a goal, an objective, something in your mind. So that's vision in a nutshell. I'm giving you the short version here, of course.
Yeah, of course.
System number 2 is Genius Zone. This is answering the question, well, why you? Why are you the one to make that vision reality? Well, in my case, if I don't take out the trash, nobody else is going to do it. So that's my genius zone, is I'm the only person who can do it. But in the case of, let's say you're starting a new business, well, why are you uniquely suited to start this business? What's the combination of skills, knowledge, experience that makes you ideally suited to do this? Not necessarily better than anybody else, but this is your mission, your calling, your purpose, and this is the best that you have to offer the world. What makes that your genius zone? And an example would be, I grew up skateboarding. So I know a lot about skateboarding. I actually started a skate shop when I was a teenager, and I've worked in the industry, and I know people in the industry. I know some of these professionals. And so I know a bit about skateboarding, but if I said skateboarding is my genius zone, it wouldn't work, because there are a million other people out there who know just as much, if not more, about skateboarding than I do. So by itself, skateboarding doesn't make me very unique. And I could also say, what about marketing? I've run a marketing agency for 20 years. I've got a lot of experience writing about marketing. I've written a book about marketing. I interviewed all these CMOs. So I could be the marketing guy, right? Yeah, that wouldn't be a good genius zone for me either, because there are a lot of other people who have run marketing agencies and written marketing books out there. So I would just be 1 in a million if I said, I'm going to try to be the marketing guy and that's my genius zone. Right. However, what happens when we intersect or overlap these 2 areas, skateboarding and marketing? If we overlap these 2, and I ask myself, who in the world knows as much about skateboarding and marketing the way that I do? It might be 10 people in the world. There just aren't that many skateboarders who have run a marketing agency for 20 years or interviewed 30 CMOs. What other skater has done that? There might be 10, maybe, out there. So I could take that overlap and say, I'm going to make this my genius zone. And now I'm going to go to Nike or Adidas and explain this to them. And they're going to say, wow, you can help us sell a ton of shoes because of these overlapping areas of expertise. And now I could do well doing that. Well, that's not the genius zone I've chosen, but that's an example of how the genius zone works. That when you overlap 2 things like that, then there's power in that. You can do things that nobody else can do. It's like having a superpower.
Yeah, I thank you for taking the words. It is a superpower. Josh is brilliant. I really think, and I hope this interview plants a seed at some point that becomes a reality. So here's my vision. I hope you turn this into like a docu-series or a YouTube series where you interview people about vision, about Genius Zone. I really think this could be an entrepreneurial movie about, and really deep dive on this, because when you said Genius Zone about skateboard and marketing, I was like, wow, that's a brilliant example of how somebody could really kind of find that unique niche that only they or a few people on the planet could really speak to and articulate?
So and I would love to do that. I love to start that series. So I might start that one of these days, and I'll give you full credit.
You don't know. No, I would be I'd be your first customer. So, anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to mention that. Please continue.
Sure. So system 3 is audience. Who are you trying to influence? If you need the trash taken out today and you've got a 10-year-old kid, then maybe it's your 10-year-old kid that you're trying to influence. That's your audience for that particular task. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to start a business, you've got multiple audiences perhaps, because you've got your customers, you've got your investors, you've got your business partner, you've got your employees. So you've got different audiences, and you would have a different vision for each of those, or maybe multiple visions for each one. Right. But whatever the task is that you have to get done, there's going to be an audience, and not just an audience in the sense of who might be interested in this or who's everybody that I could talk to, but really what we want to figure out is who is your ideal audience? Who is the person that you should focus all of your attention on and say, I'm going for broke with this audience? And this is the mistake a lot of people tend to make with audiences. They tend to go very broad and try to capture everybody because there's this fear that if they don't go broad, they're going to leave money on the table. They're not going to capture somebody that they should be going after. When really the name of the game is going very niche, going very specific, so that you can appeal to somebody to the point where they say, wow, this company with their product, the way that they're talking to me with their marketing, it's like they're inside my head. It's like they know who I am. I've got to use this because they understand me. We do business with people we know, like, and trust. And we do business with companies that we feel like know and like us. Mm-hmm. And when somebody pegs that ideal audience and then that flows into their messaging and their content, it forms a connection there by going really niche. And the way that we find an ideal audience, it's kind of the same way that we find the genius zone. We start overlapping different areas. So we map out all these different characteristics of all the people who might be interested in what we have. And then we start combining those and saying, okay, which of these are the most important? And you'll figure out 5 or 6 of these that overlap. And you say, these 5 characteristics define our ideal audience. This is who we're going after. And then you can get very targeted with your messaging in a way that really connects with people. So that's the brief overview of audience, which then leads to, finally, we actually start creating content. And content is a few things. It's your message, it's the channel that you deliver it through, and it's the action that you want your audience to take. So when I say message, what I mean is, if I'm writing a book, my message is not the title, usually. It's not all the different words that are in the book. It's really, what do I want people to walk away from when they have that book? So, for example, I'll just pick up the first book here that's on my desk. So here's Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk that he wrote 10 years ago or so. His first best-selling book, I believe. And, what's the message of this book? And I'm just doing this on the fly here. I didn't have this plan, so I got to think about it for a second.
Yeah.
It says, the subtitle is Cash In on Your Passion. Well, to me, the real message of this book is that anybody can get on social media and they can use social media to get ahead in their career or to build a business, but to get what they want out of life through social media and through all the tools that are out there. To me, that's the message of the book. So if that's the message that Gary wanted to communicate with his book, he's succeeded. If I run into somebody and they're talking to me about their problem and I say, hey, you know what? You should read Crush It because he talks about exactly your problem and how to fix that. You need to get on social media. You need to be more active there. You need to get your message out. You should go read Gary's book, Crush It. And then you become a Gary Vaynerchuk fanboy because you read his book. So that's the message of the book. So whatever your content's going to be, whether it's a video or a book or a social media post, there's a message that you're trying to get to your audience. And you may never actually say the message, but it's what you want your audience to think once they get done consuming your content. So that's part of your content. Then the second question is, what's your channel? How are you going to deliver this? And the answer to that is you go where your audience is. So if your audience is on LinkedIn, you've got to be on LinkedIn. If they're on YouTube, you're on YouTube. If they're reading books, then you're publishing books. but you follow the audience, you go to where your audience hangs out.
Yep.
Perfect example of this is I wrote a Forbes article that one article single-handedly generated over $5 million for my marketing agency.
Wow.
I wrote 164 articles for Forbes over a 3-year period, but that one article generated $5 million. And so naturally, I thought, hey, I write for a bunch of other publications. If this article did so well on Forbes, what if I kind of copied and pasted this, but rewrote it so it wasn't an exact copy, but then I put that article up on some of these other publications like Mashable and Entrepreneur. Maybe I could get another $5 million out of this article. So I did that. I copied it, I changed enough of it so it wasn't really the identical article, but it was essentially the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it up on Entrepreneur, for example, and nothing. I got no engagement. Not a single client came to me from publishing it on Entrepreneur, but this had generated $5 million for me on Forbes. The difference was the audience for that art on Entrepreneur. And you would think it'd be kind of similar audience, but no, it was absolutely separate audiences. And so it didn't work. So channel's important.
Yes.
And finally, it's action is the last part of content, which is what do you want your audience to do? If you write a book, but you don't ask your audience to do something, but if you ask them, if you make it clear, if you lead them down a path towards a specific action, they're much more likely to take the action that you want them to take. So that's system number 4 in the 7 systems of influence. That's content.
So basically part of content is really channeling them into an exact request or call to action.
Right. There's got to be some sort of ask. And it doesn't necessarily need to be blatant. It doesn't need to be phrased as, will you please go do XYZ right now?
Right.
But you should be thinking about this when you craft content that, hey, I want people to do something. I mean, what do I want them to do as a result of this? And how am I going to get them to do that?
Yeah.
That should be part of the content creation process every single time that you create something.
Great insight. Okay, good. So then we move to action.
Right. So system number 5 is action. Now, this is the action that you take, not your audience, but what are you going to do? You've got your vision, your genius zone, your audience, you've got your content, or at least your idea of what you want to create with your content. What's your action plan? How are you going to get this all done? And so everybody has different systems, productivity systems, whatever, to get stuff done. I've got a whiteboard over here. I write a bunch of stuff on my whiteboard. And I use a pretty simple methodology myself. I do the big rocks thing that Stephen Covey made popular, where he says you put your big rocks in first every day. Those are your big priorities. You get those done. All the small stuff like answering emails and everything, you fit those into the cracks. And that's how you get stuff done. So it's just extreme prioritization, doing first things first. That's how I do it. Other people have different methods of doing it, but you need to have some sort of plan. If you're writing a book, maybe you say, I'm going to write an hour every morning, or I'm going to write 2 pages every morning. There's got to be some system to it, and it should be a simple, easy system that you can remember. If you have to look up your system every day in order to execute it, you're not going to do it. It's got to be something that is just so easy, so simple, so natural that you just do it because it is easy. Right. So that's action. System number 6 is collaboration, which is the fact that you just can't do that much on your own. Now, you can do a lot on your own. I mean, you can write a book more or less on your own, but in fact, a book author is probably the quintessential lone wolf type of entrepreneur or content creator that we might think of. Mm-hmm. And yet even authors, they are standing on the shoulders of giants. Somebody taught them how to do what they're doing. So, and they're working with other people. They're working with publishers. So there is collaboration going on there. Yes. One of my favorite examples is Harper Lee, author of To Kill a Mockingbird. She wrote one book, and she's a single author. And we kind of think of her as just this woman sitting down, wrote her book, published it, became the biggest bestseller in the history of books, more or less. But that's not the whole story. When she was young, she was friends with Truman Capote, another amazing author who had a lot of big bestsellers, and she talked with him a lot. That's a form of collaboration. But the biggest collaboration that helped Harper Lee was that she had not written To Kill a Mockingbird yet, and she had some friends. It was a couple. They knew that she had a book in her and that she was not writing it. And so they came to her one Christmas and they said, Harper, we know you've got this book. You need to get it out, but you're not doing it. We saved up money. We're paying for you to quit your job and work on your book for a year. So Harper Lee quit her job, lived off that money for a year, wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. That's the power of collaboration. Things happen with collaboration that wouldn't happen if we just go out and try to do it ourselves. Another quick example of collaboration is my friend Derek Anderson. He was an entrepreneur in the Bay Area, and he started interviewing successful entrepreneurs there, just doing little fireside chats, and he would film it and put it up on YouTube. And he was getting like 10 or 20 people coming out to these little fireside chats, and it was a fun little thing. But then more people started to come, and more people, and then somebody came along and said, hey, can I start doing these too? And so they started a second chapter in San Jose or nearby. And then Derek started to see how this could become a business, and he started to enlist more and more people to start chapters of these fireside chats all around the world, and it became known as Startup Grind. And today, Startup Grind has something like 700 chapters around the world. They have more than 2 million people have attended a Startup Grind event. They've influenced hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. People have made deals at these events. They're huge. Anybody who's any big startup type person has spoken at one of these events. They do a global event every year in the Bay Area. Derek could not have done that alone. If he was doing it alone, he'd still be hosting 20 or 30 people at fireside chats every month in the Bay Area. But because he went out and he said, I'm going to go find other people who want to do these and sign them up to do their own events, he enlisted 700 people to go start their own chapters of Startup Grind. And now he's influenced millions of people through that collaboration. All right. You ready for number 7?
Josh, can I interject something?
Yep.
You need to become the Harper Lee of the 7 systems of influence.
Well, if somebody saves up some money and pays for me to take a year off and everything else, I might do that.
Well, I'll put this video out there, and hopefully we find an ambassador, a financial ambassador for you.
Yeah, I'll plead poverty. Maybe we can do like a GoFundMe or something. All right. So system number 7 then is my favorite. It's the most important system, and it's love. And this often catches people off guard because they're like, wait, I thought this was like a business thing. And wait, love, what are we talking about here? And the kind of love we're talking about here is we're talking about excitement, empathy, passion, goodwill, and kindness. So, for example, if you're producing content and it's on a topic that you don't really care about, you're just doing it because you're trying to get money, it's all transactional, you're just trying to do 1 + 1 = 2 and figure this out, but you don't really care about the content you're creating, it's going to show, and people aren't going to respond to that content so much. Whereas if you're excited about what you have to share with people because it's really part of you and it's something you care deeply about, that's going to be communicated through your content. So you've got to be excited about what you're doing and what you're talking about. The most important part of System 7, I think, is goodwill. Empathy is important. I mean, it's critical. Kindness is important. But goodwill is the difference between people feeling that you care about them versus that you don't care about them and you're just using them as an object to get to what you want done. If you truly care about people, that will come through in your content, in your actions, and everything that you do. And here's the secret. If people know that you care about them, you can mess everything else up. You can get the other 6 systems totally wrong.
So true.
And people will still respond. They'll say, well, you know, he's terrible at his content. It stinks. His book cover's ugly, whatever. But he means well. I can tell he cares about me.
Right. He really cares.
Yeah. Whereas the opposite is he doesn't care about me. You could do everything else right. And if they get the sense that you don't care about them, then they're going to ignore it. So I know a guy who's a very successful entrepreneur running a software company. And I mean, you can get away with this for a while. This guy's getting away with it. He runs a very big company. He's very popular, best-selling author. And yet behind the scenes, he's telling people, his friends, these people who come up to me at these events and they want me to sign their book or my book that they bought from me, these people are all idiots. They don't know what they're doing. I hate doing this. I hate shaking their hands. Like behind the scenes, he doesn't love his own audience. He doesn't really care about them. He actually looks down on them. How long is that going to last? He might get away with it for a while, but it's going to catch up with him. People are going to sense it. And in fact, I've had people come to me and they're like, can you help me out with this influence stuff and coach me on this? And I want to kind of be like this guy, and they'll name this guy, but I don't want to be like him at the same time. Like, I want to accomplish what he's accomplished, but I don't want to be like him. There's something about him that rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
So people sense it when you don't really care about them. And yeah, you can mask that for a while, but you can't mask it from everybody all the time.
I won't mention names, but I know someone who is a content creator who supposedly puts out all this positivity, and you can do it. But having met that person and knowing other people that have met that person, he's not going to last long, because that's not who he is in real life.
Yeah, I mean, how long can you live a fake life like that? Like, I don't know. I couldn't do that for a day. I'd just be like, forget this. Like, this is too hard. It feels like work. I can't do that. Some people apparently can do it for a while, but eventually it catches up with you.
Absolutely. Karma, or whatever your system is of beliefs. There's something in every good book that throughout history, through all philosophers, that will tell you that, if you're not genuine about your purpose, somehow life catches up with you. Now, what I love about this is that you also have this as a downloadable PDF. People can go to your website. Again, it's joshsteimle.com, and all they got to do is give up their email address, and they get this PDF. You can print it. I really like that. This is something I want to emulate with our website, is come up with some type of action checklist that you have. So if you are watching this now or in the future on YouTube, please go to Josh Steimle. That's STEIMLE.com. For those that are listening to this on a podcast, and definitely check out your content. I have a question for you. I'm going to go back to us talking. I've asked a couple people this, and I would like to get your take. We've been in this undescribable crazy year in 2020. I know that I've gone
crazy in so many ways. Yes.
Crazy. Yeah, there's layers to this onion. I had to go through a rebrand, and I tell people I had my Jerry Maguire moment. I was up late night and typing my manifesto and all that other stuff. What do you think is going to happen in 2021? What do you see as the big opportunity in 2021 for content creators and for business professionals?
Well, there are a lot of technical things that are changing. I mean, everybody knows what Zoom is now. So it's very easy to set up Zoom meetings and Zoom calls. And I mean, a year ago, I had to train people on it. I'd set up a Zoom call and it was, hey, this is how it works. And here's a little guide, and you might have to download the software. Now I can just say, let's do a Zoom call. So that's made it really easy to do webinars and calls and things like that. But technology is always changing. And so that's the one constant, right? Is that we can always depend on there being a new technology that we're going to need to adapt to. So that's not going to be the big thing in 2021, I think. Yogi Berra said it's really hard to make predictions, especially about the future. True. And when I look at 2021 and I don't just want to say what's going to be the big thing, but what's going to be different and big about the future. And I think one thing that will be driven by COVID is that we've really had a shakeup of people. I think in the Bay Area and areas that are more, I don't want to just say tech savvy, but the younger, more tech savvy crowd is used to a lot of things like Zoom and video conference and not having to fly around to go to meetings, but just, hey, let's just jump on a Zoom call and talk to each other type of thing. But now everybody has been forced into this. And up until this point, I think it's been a very small minority of people who have actually embraced technology the way that some of us might assume, oh, everybody's been doing that for the last 20 years. I mean, come on, the internet started in the 90s. That was the last millennium.
Right.
But I think COVID has finally pushed us into the area that we all thought we were going to be in 2002. And then we've all assumed since 2010 that everybody was there. I think we've actually been pushed into that area now. And so that's going to bring to fruition some of the things that we already thought would happen, but really haven't, or things that have been in progress, but we just didn't realize what stage of the game it was still at. So, for example, virtual conferences have become a thing this year. Yes. Because every live event got canceled, and yet all these event planners, they've got to make a living, and speakers still want to speak to the audience, and audiences still want to hear from the speakers. And so we've seen this boom in virtual conferences coming out. And yet the flip side of this is people are appreciating human contact more than ever.
Very true.
You see that people are gathering in face-to-face, and they recognize the value of that more than they've ever recognized it before. So I think there's going to be opportunities to go more virtual with your business, but at the same time, there's going to be a killer advantage to people who can take advantage of that desire for in-person, human-to-human contact in a way that it wouldn't have been as effective or as appreciated before. Now it will be more appreciated. For example, writing a handwritten thank you card when you get something. That was a thing that you see in a lot of business books. They say, write a handwritten card because nobody does this.
Right.
Well, people have been saying that for years, but now it means a lot more than it did just a year ago to get a handwritten card from somebody, because it's a physical, tangible sign of human connection when people are thirsty and hungry and desperate for that type of connection. Or once, hopefully, we get a vaccine for COVID and we can go back to sort of life as normal, we're never really going back, because there are people who are going to say, I used to do a 3-day business trip to go meet with a potential client, but now I can just do a Zoom call. So we're going to see a lot of people doing Zoom calls, and that's going to be great for some people and some businesses, but it's going to also provide an opportunity for people to show up in person and make that 3-day trip, and it's going to be appreciated in a way that it hasn't been appreciated ever before. So that's my prediction, is that the virtual stuff will improve some things, but there's going to be this advantage for people who figure out how to make that human connection.
I agree. I think on the other side of this, I concur with you. There's going to be a renaissance of human connection, because it got taken away. Mm-hmm. I was reading an article on LinkedIn. There's people that actually get in their car and drive to work, even though work's closed, and drive back just to feel a sense of routine in their life.
Yeah.
Right? Like the guy packs his lunch, gets in his car, sits in the parking lot for 5 minutes, eats his lunch, and then goes back just to kind of, get out of the house. Because you can only sit in front of a computer or your television or Netflix for so long, but somehow kind of reminisce and kind of get routine. I don't know whether it's kind of a ritual that somehow the gods will then bring that life back to you if you keep doing the ritual. I don't know what it is, if it's something tribal in us. But I found that was very intriguing. That I think, I live in Las Vegas. This town was built on conventions.
Yeah.
For 30 years, we've been the convention capital of the United States, if not the world.
Yeah, people think Vegas is all about gambling. Like, no, it's all about conventions.
Oh, gambling, I think, is number 3 now. Up to COVID, was the number 3 moneymaker. That was just kind of a factor of, we'll play some, whatever. We'll play some blackjack but the convention is what brings the 52 million people per year into the city. And then, they go see a show and get a drink, and they do all the other things. Mm-hmm. That's dramatically affected the state of Nevada. In fact, during the summer, Nevada had the highest unemployment of all 50 states.
Yeah.
So I think even more so in my city, we're appreciating that and going, when are we going to get this thing back up and running to get that human connection? And I think obviously there'll be protocols in place like you said, we'll never go back to the way it was before. It'll always be different to some degree, but I agree with you. I think we're going to long for that human connection. Josh, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope to, when you come out with the book, I'd like to interview you again and specifically go into that. And maybe after a few months of it, some case studies, some success stories of how you're implementing it. Because I know that, in talking to people, LinkedIn has kind of had this rebirth of interest in the last few months. So I think your book and your success stories and case studies would be very timely.
Well, thank you so much. I'd love to do that.
Yeah. And, best of luck to you. And I personally, if the only reason we did this show was for me, I'm glad we did it. But I know that we're going to be sending this out to thousands and thousands of people on our email database and on our podcast, et cetera. And once again, thanks again for your time. Congratulations on all your success, and looking to forward to more content from you.
Well, thank you so much, Edwin, for having me on. I really enjoyed this as well.
Yeah. Hey, this has been Edwin Dearborn, Josh Steimle, and we've been talking here on Growth Driven. Make it a great day, and we'll see you again soon.